Welcome to another episode of CXO Leaderboard. And today we've got Amit Dasgupta with us. Amit's had a long storied career in the civil service. He works with the University of New South Wales in Australia at the moment, and he's written a few books on education, and he's lived abroad all over the world. So what we're here to talk to him about today is an Indian education versus foreign education. How does education help you become a better leader? And is living in a different culture good for you, bad for you, doesn't matter? What's going on? That's why we're here with Amit Dasgupta. So Amit, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. It's a great pleasure to be on your show, and especially to talk about all the vast number of things you've talked about, mentioned. But let me just start by picking up on one, and then of course we could explore the others. When you said that, what's it like studying abroad, and is that a great thing? Is that not a great thing?
Does it make a difference?
Does it make a difference? When I used to, if I were to give a talk or a lecture to a bunch of students at the University of New South Wales, as opposed to the talks that I give in Indian institutions over here, there is a big difference. And you know what stands out?
Wait, so we're talking about talks to people at the same level, same age groups?
Undergrad, postgrad. In India, they'd be all Indians.
Okay.
At UNSW, it has 120 different nationalities. So I'm talking in a classroom which has Indian students, Sri Lankans, Pakistanis, Chinese, Vietnamese, Koreans, Japanese, American, and that immediately impacts the human psyche, because it makes you start thinking in a far more global manner. Because you're now surrounded by a number of people who we refer to as other cultures.
Right, the divisions, us and them.
Yeah. And then when you sit down to do a project, and one of your colleagues is a Chinese student, and another is a Sri Lankan, and the third one is Bolivian, you start thinking about different cultures, you start becoming friends with them, you start knowing what they're like, and it's not theoretical, it's actually practical, because you live with them, you study with them, you work with them. And today the world is changing. When we say a global world, and that at the touch of a button you can, jump from New Delhi to New York, imagine being in an atmosphere where it's actually real time that you are able to interface with different cultures.
That's an interesting point you make, and theoretically it does make a lot of sense. But I've got to ask you this now. We're looking at the world today. You've got America, you've got UK, different parts of Europe, Australia. Presumably all their leaders have gone to colleges like this. They've had experiences like this. And yet a lot of the Western world today is closing itself off. So how do you explain that transition? If you say it's so important at that education level, how come Donald Trump, Theresa May, Malcolm Turnbull exist?
I think, the whole protectionist, if you want, ideology, or at least a protectionist trend which is there, and it's not just a trend which we see now, though at this point of time it seems to be far more accentuated than it was ever before.
Right.
But protectionism has been there for a long time. And this protectionism is not a consequence of education. This protectionism is as a consequence of trying to tell ourselves that, look, we have this limited kitty. Is someone going to come from there and take it all away? To a large extent, education transforms the human mind. But it's only to a large extent. At the end of the day, if economies don't do well, you will end up with protectionism.
Okay.
I think the functioning of an economy is critical to the openness of a liberal mind, if you like, an all-embracive mind, because keeping people out, keeping cultures out doesn't work.
So then let's go in a little more in depth, something that we've been mentioning, education. Just what is the role of education in the life of a person? Can you make a leader through just college education, or is it life experiences and something else, or does education play a big role?
I think education is not the only way that leaders are born. You don't need to have an undergraduate or a postgraduate or a PhD and then be acknowledged as a leader. Leadership is a consequence of how you imbibe and how you are able to negotiate your life experiences. Education is a tool and a strategy through which you can do this. At the same time, leaders need to work with a large number of people who require technical knowledge and expertise. And for that, there is no substitute to a very strong higher education model. At the same time, you cannot ignore that primary and secondary education needs to be able to foster curiosity. And unless it does this, the human mind is going to become static.
Okay. So can you explain to me, you mentioned earlier, when you give talks in India and Australia, you see a different crowd. But how does the crowd respond? So do you see differences in Indian mentality in IIT versus in multicultural mentality in UNSW?
Yeah, I think it's multiculturalism is a core component of UNSW's teaching pedagogy, but at the same time, it's how they are able to connect what you study with the world outside. So our knowledge is praxeological, if you like, which is the combination of theory and practice. In India, we have a tendency of making educational institutions cocoons.
Right.
So you're here in this educational institution, but the world is out there. At UNSW, you embrace the world out there and you make education relate to the world out there. That is the purpose, in my view, of higher education, which transforms worlds. Because at the end of the day, what's the point of education if you're not going to be able to impact your surrounding?
Right. So you made an interesting comment before we came on air, that of all the leaders you've talked to, all the people you've talked to in life, the most important ability to have is the ability to make a decision. So could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, we are today, and this is even before the computer age, if you ask someone, what's the most important thing you do in life, many people will say, breathing, but that comes, you don't think about it that I'm breathing, unless you're drowning. But really the most important thing you do in life is taking a decision, standing by that decision. Most certainly you can do course correction if your decision is not correct. But taking a decision means being able to evaluate all the options, knowing exactly what you want to do in life, and then doing it. Today, with the mobile phone and the computer, we are suffering from choice overload. You want to walk into a supermarket and, your wife or your mom or your sister or your daughter tells you, can you go and get a toothpaste? It's shelf after shelf after shelf of toothpaste. Now, you have to make up your mind as to which one you're going to pick up. So in my case, I have a soft corner, and so if I have to go and buy a toothpaste, I like toothpaste which is colored. So I end up with green toothpaste or red toothpaste, and that's my criteria. And but you decide how you're going to take a decision,
right.
And that's critical. And education must give you the wherewithal to be able to take what I call an informed decision.
Okay. So let's get a little bit more practical now. We've talked about how theoretically a multicultural education can help you, how different kinds of education should work rather than how they do work today. But practically, now you're on a tour, you're talking to students, you're talking to high school, college students, corporates, whoever, trying to convince them that UNSW is doing a lot of good work and you should try and help them out, or you should try and get yourself into that line of work. Now I ask you this question, as a student, let's forget the guys up there, the corporates who are doing multinational deals. A student, basic 18-year-old guy, he's got this opportunity to go to Australia, he's got an opportunity to go to UNSW. Now he gets there, he studies hard, makes a lot of friends, opens his mind, all great. At the end of his 3-year, 4-year, 5-year course, now reality hits him. He's in a different continent. He may have all the friends on the planet, but he's got to find a job. If he doesn't find a job, he gets booted back to a country he barely knows anymore. So today, practically, how damaging is it for someone to get chucked back after 5 years in a new country when they've gotten used to this new mentality and then come back to India where the mentality, the culture, everything's different? He comes to work with a bunch of kids who graduate from Indian colleges who don't have that open-mindedness. So how damaging is that? And is that something we should solve? Is that something that eventually will get solved by itself? What's the problem here?
So let me not start by giving you a advertisement spiel on UNSW. Let me just start by saying how the Australian government has proactively looked at this because they see foreign or international students actually as an investment and not just a revenue generating bucket, if you like. But most certainly they earn a lot of revenue. But they see them as an investment as well. As a consequence, what's happened is they've introduced a series of measures. One, if you're in a full-time 2-year course, and your undergrad course is 3 years, your engineering is 4 years, so if you're in one of these full-time courses, you're able to work 20 hours a week while the university is in session at the Australian government's fair minimum wage, which is significant.
Okay.
When the university is not in session, let's say Easter vacation or Christmas or summer vacation, that cap of 20 hours is lifted. Right? So you can work 40 hours a week, which is significant.
Yeah.
But after you complete your course, you are allowed to work for 2 years on a work-study visa. After those 2 years are over, you're able to work longer, provided you get an employer sponsorship.
But aren't those for very specific fields?
No, it's open to multiple fields, and let me now tell you about UNSW. It's the only university in the world that believes that education is irrelevant unless you are employable. So because education and employability are linked together, from day one of your joining, they have a careers and counseling department which, free of cost, actually maps you, guides you on how you can get a job. What are the soft skills you need to know? How do you write a CV? How do you take part in an interview? What are the internships that are available? What kind of jobs can you apply for? All that is the job of the careers and counseling, and they handhold you through your entire tenure. They take you to the well, but drinking the water is something you do on your own. Because we believe that every student who joins UNSW is talented. It's like a pencil. The lead is already there. All we do is sharpen the pencil. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And will these students have to come back? I don't think so. I think the quality of education is so high. The largest number of CEOs in all of Australia are all UNSW graduates. We have the highest employment rate. So I don't see a graduate from UNSW struggling and saying, I can't find a job. This may happen with certain other institutions, but with UNSW it has never happened. Nor
Even the
indeed
international students?
it has never happened. Yeah.
You're saying we have 100% employability out of UNSW?
100%. With UNSW, it's 100%. 98% employability on day one after you graduate. 2% within that week.
All right.
But you need to take advantage of all the facilities which are put forward. Now, if you don't visit the careers and counseling, you will never learn how to write a CV. You will never recognize that writing a CV to a bank is different from writing a CV to, let's say, Ernst & Young or to one of the big four. The CVs will change. Now, this is again a process of education. So I think when the student is focused in terms of decision making, focused in terms of getting a job in a particular area of work with a particular, let's say, identifiable criteria of a company, it's doable.
Okay, so now it's fair to say that UNSW is probably a better college to go to than most on the planet. But generally speaking, in India, what do you see the deficiencies in higher education in India compared to the other countries? Because if you talk about a lot of the STEM candidates across the planet, STEM leaders are Indians. They went to IITs. I mean, the Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, he went to IIT. Microsoft, all of these guys came from India. So if you're saying that there's such a big gap between the two, how do you explain the fact that so many Indians out of India have gone on to become good leaders? And also, is there really what is the gap that you see between Australia and India, or anywhere else in India?
So let me take you back to this analogy that I talked about, sharpening the pencil. The people that you talked about, outstanding Indians who became recognized as outstanding Indians when they're abroad. The education institution they went to sharpened the pencil, which means that the quality of education, the facilities that were available, was qualitatively different. I think in India we suffer from volume. The demand is significant. The supply does not match with the demand. And this has now become a legacy issue. And to transform this is going to take a phenomenal amount of work. The question is, do you wait for, how many years are you going to wait for in order to transform this? Because if we are talking about a demographic dividend, if the young are not able to be employable in high quality jobs, then it's going to be a demographic drawback, not a dividend, you know.
Well,
I mean, ask yourself the question, a country like Australia and Israel, smaller populations than India, why is it that they have so many more Nobel laureates than India has?
So, something you mentioned actually could be an answer to what you just said, legacy. So, in India, we have a legacy of, well, a lot of economic divide, a lot of caste divide that may be stopping, you know, these pencils that need to be sharpened from getting into college or even getting into a secondary education. So, would you see that as a bigger answer to the fact that we don't have enough Nobel laureates compared to in Israel or in Australia?
Okay, so I think it's a fair question and it's an important question that needs to be addressed. But let me break it up into two parts. There is no Indian institution today in the top 100 in the QS ranking. It doesn't exist. Okay. Your most powerful institution in terms of ranking is one of the IITs, and it is ranked 172. Okay. And the IITs, as you know, started many years ago, and there's a lot of government help, support. There was international collaboration as well to build these up. The question to ask ourselves is, why is it that it's not doing what it was meant to do? How many patents have the IITs, which are our premier institutions, actually produced which transform lives? You'll find that it is statistically insignificant. Right. The other is, if you look at the social disparities which have actually, through which education and its delivery has been hamstrung, I see education as a national priority. It is not something that you leave in the hands of just a few and say that, look, you start producing, because the most critical thing is you have to match volume with quality. So if you look at the private sector, which is into education, they produce world-class education, but for 2,000 students, 3,000 students. You have to now look at a system by which the University of New South Wales is ranked 45th and has 58,000 students. Wow. You can match volume and quality. I think what you need is a national consensus that we all pool in our resources, because if you do not have a highly qualified, educated young, it cripples the country. How do you take your GDP forward? How are we going to do all these things about a knowledge revolution? It's not going to work. And your best and your brightest will indeed go abroad, because that's where they will flourish. You don't want this.
Okay, so the problem here is education and ecosystem. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been a fascinating discussion.
Thank you very much.
Amit Dasgupta of UNSW and the Foreign Service and many other things.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.